welcome everybody back to the YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Brandon, and we are continuing on our build series of a twin turbo Dart LS 427 engine. Today we're going to be working on honing the cylinders. These Dart blocks, when they come in slightly undersized on the cylinders, so we have to hone them to our finished size, to the piston wall clearance and stuff. So today I'm going to walk through that process, show you torque plate honing, just everything that goes into getting our cylinders to the right size and the right surface finish, and checking that with a profilometer. Quick little intro. This is what we call a torque plate. This bolts to the block and simulates a head being torqued on there. Just helps pull on the threads, distort the cylinders any way that the head is actually going to. That way when we hone it, it's nice and round, and then when the head's on there, it will still be round. There won't be any kind of distortion like that. So this plate is for a 6-bolt LS block, like these Dart blocks are. We do have them set up for a 1/2-inch stud that we just went over in the last video. And we've also got our fire rings installed. That way we can replicate as close to possible as what the head will be when it's on the engine. So we'll go through getting the block set up into our machine, and we will get started. Alright guys, so now we kind of got the block set up in the machine. We have this bar that goes through our main housing, and then we clamp that down, and that's just how we kind of center the block so that our bores are centered right over the mains. We'll show you the process of getting our studs in there, getting a torque plate on there, and we can get going on setting up the home head. So I've kind of got all our studs, nuts, washers, everything for putting the torque plate on kind of laid out. That way we can get our ARP assembly lube on there and get them installed and torqued down. So I didn't touch on this part. We want to use the same kind of head gasket that we're going to be using on the engine, whether it's composite, MLS, copper. We want to still simulate as close to what the actual engine, once it's finished assembled, is. That way we can get the accurate torque reading onto the block. So now we got our nuts and everything lubed up and installed, we can start torquing them. I always like to do 3 equal steps to get up to our final torque number, just to help everything kind of work down uniformly, just to make sure everything's nice and flat. So now we got all those torqued, we can roll the block over and we can get the nuts on the studs in the inside. This is just a close-up of where our studs are inside the lifter valley. so we can work on getting our nuts on them and then get those torqued. Alrighty guys, so now we got our torque plate on there, everything torqued down. I'm going to go over how we set up our hone head to the right dimensions and setting up our different grit diamond stones that we use, and should then show you all the honing process. So we have this setting fixture right here that as we run this screw, these pins run out so we can tighten that to the inside of our cylinder, and then that gives us our dimension for setting up our different shoes. And then we can slide this out. You can see this little pin here, and that will determine or tell us the size of our or height of our shoes and our stones. So these are our shoes. They're a piece of bronze material. That way it doesn't scuff up the cylinders or anything when it makes contact. These kind of help with centering the hone head and keeping everything running true and concentric to the cylinder. So we'll set these up. So as you can see, we have different thickness of shims that we can use to set the height of our shoes. And right now we are set just below an 8. So an 8 is what we like. It gives us good pressure on the cylinder to start with and keeps that contact, keep everything concentric. But as you can see here, let me just show you kind of our little pin that runs out to check the height. We'll get the other shoe set up and then we can do the stones. So these are the 3 stones that we use in our setup, in our process. So these first 2, the left and the middle one, are actually a diamond abrasive. It cuts a lot better, moves the material a lot quicker, everything seems to stay a little straighter. So obviously we have one that's fairly rough, fairly coarse, and that is our roughing. Then we come over here and we have one that's approximately a 600 grit finish or equivalent, and we'll finish with that one, and then we take a normal vitrified stone and then we'll do a few strokes with it to kind of plateau on the surface and just knock off some of them last little peaks. We can bring our hone head over one of the cylinders and we can lower it down into the cylinder. Another thing that I forgot to show is that if you look in here, you can see those 2 little tick marks. They kind of line up with each other. That lets us know that the machine is at the top of its stroke. So then we can set the height of our block in relation to the stones. So we have a handy little guide here that lets us know the height of where we should set our stones. So as you can see, our stone is flush with the top of our little guide. Now if it wasn't, we have this handle here we can rotate to raise and lower the block in relation to the head. Now that's set, we can get rolled back over to the other side of the block and get started on our honing. So this is our Sun-In double gauge, and that's what we use for measuring our cylinders. So we can take it in here and kind of rock it over. That's where our size is set for cylinder size to that 0. So currently we are about 7 thousandths too small. So what we're going to do is we're going to hone it so that we are about 1/2 thousandth from size in our roughing stones. And then once we get to the 1/2 thousandths from size, we can switch over to our finishing diamonds and take it to size, and then do the few strokes with our Plateau stone. So I just like to check, especially on the first cylinder, do a set number of strokes. I've done 20 strokes on that one. Then like to see how the cylinder's coming out, how much material has been removed. It gives me an idea of how many strokes I can go to before I have to check again. So we've done our roughing pass. So I've gotten it to about 1 thou to 1.5 thou from size. That just kind of allows, basically I do that, allow the block to cool, because as it gets hot it's going to expand. Throwing it to cool back down. I'll check it, and then we can take it to our 1/2 thou from size to get ready for our finishing step. So I'm going to bring you in and show you just kind of close up of after our finishing step compared to our roughing step. As you can see, it is noticeably a smoother finish. And it will get a little smoother after we do our platooning step. Show you how we're looking after our finishing step. We're just over 0 at the top, just over in the middle, and just over at the bottom. So that will work since there's still a little bit of heat in the cylinder. And when it fully cools down back to room temperature, where we're measuring for all our clearances and tolerances and stuff, it'll be right on the spec. So now we can take and we can set up and do our Plateau step, and then we'll be done with this side and flip over and start on the other side. Alrighty, so that's it for this side. And again, that Plateau honing step not really trying to remove material. We're just trying to flatten off any kind of peaks that are still left. It's not going to change the size of the cylinder, really any that we can measure with our regular bore gauge. So at this point, we'll kind of get the torque plate off this side, kind of get it cleaned up, and we'll flip the block over, get it set up on the other side so we can get that side home. So while we're waiting on the block to cool after our roughing pass, I kind of want to show you all something I'm dealing with. Our stones are getting somewhat close to the end of their life as far as our roughing diamond stones. And one thing I'm battling with having to dwell so much at the bottom is that we've actually got taper in our stone itself. So that's causing some issues and causing it to not really remove material as much at the bottom. So I'll try to show you all that right now. I don't know if you can really see it that well, but you can see over here on the left side it's fairly thin compared to this right side. So that's kind of what we're battling with. Typically when our stones are nice and straight, we can hone normally and just let the machine run. We don't have to do as much dwelling, but that is a nice thing with having this dwelling feature on the machine, is we can dwell wherever we need to remove those tight spots and try to keep the cylinder straight. So our finishing diamonds, I'll kind of show you that as well. They are much straighter with hardly no taper in them. So that's what allows us to be able to remove that last little bit of material and get them nice and straight before we do our plateau pass. So we'll continue to let this cool, and we'll be back in a minute. So I just kind of want to show y'all kind of how much difference the torque plate does actually make when measuring the cylinder. We can measure that much distortion. I'll kind of show y'all on this side of the block. We are just over 0. It's pretty straight. Let me roll the block over, and I'll show you the side. Doesn't have the torque plate, just so you can kind of see. So that's 0.5 thousandths to, or 6 to 7 tenths small at the top, and then also in the middle we're still at 0. So it is important to be able to use a torque plate. And you can obviously see this even more in person when you're so if you had a block that wasn't torque plate honed, when we put a torque plate on there and hold it, you can see, because basically everywhere there's a bolt hole, it actually pull on the cylinders a little bit when it's torqued. So you'll have a little shadow near the top at each bolt hole. So that's just kind of why we go through this torque plate process, just to make sure that the cylinders are as round as they can be. Of course, some blocks move more than others. Fords, especially the modular Coyotes, stuff like that, they move a lot. So you definitely gotta have like motor mounts and all your main caps torqued, any kind of accessories bolted on there, or brackets and stuff that bolt to the block. That stuff can distort and move the blocks. So those are more critical, I guess you could say, to make sure we got everything on them. But these LS, especially the dart ones, torque plate, really all we need, because nothing else is really going to shift. As you can see, torque plate just affected the top, didn't affect the middle or the bottom of the cylinder. So that's pretty much it. Alright, I want to show y'all just a little bit about a surface profilometer. It's how we check our finish on our cylinders, just to make sure we've got the right values for our roughness, for our smoothness, that kind of stuff. So this is our fancy little surface profilometer, and this little tool here has a tiny little probe on the end of it that actually runs across the surface and maps out the surface finish. So I will kind of show you the process of how we do that. We want to make sure that our cylinders, or at least the one we're checking, is nice and clean. Make sure we get rid of anything that may be trapped inside our actual crosshatch grooves. And we can take and set our little probe in there, or a little clamp out. And then we can hit start, and you can see the stylus moves very slowly, but it's also mapping out our surface finish. And then it will display our values, and we can scroll through those. So our RPK number being displayed right now is our peak height, which is from, say, the middle of our valley and peak to the top of the peaks. So we want to really stay under 25 on that number, so we're good there. Our RVK is our the depth of our valleys, and that is what holds our oil. So a deeper number there is going to hold more oil. It's going to be better for say turbo engines or diesel, things that have a heavy load on them. Typically we want to be for the performance stuff between 45 and 60, so we're good inside that range. Our RA number is our average roughness, so that's fairly self-explanatory. It's the average of all the peaks in our valleys throughout the cylinder. Typically that's between 10 and 20. And then our RK number is our average roughness depth. So typically a lower number is going to have a little bit longer lifespan than a higher number. We're right inside that range typically when we want to be around 30 to 55 to 60 or so. So we're pretty good inside that range. So that's basically all there is. We use this. We can tweak depending on roughing load on the stones, finishing, strokes, how far from size we take each stone size. All that kind of stuff can vary into our surface finish. So it's very important to be able to develop the process to get the finish that you need. We always like to verify though, just to make sure that we are getting the values that we think we are supposed to be getting using the roughing load and strokes and all that kind of stuff with our stones. So that's basically it on the surface profilometer. Just kind of a double check just to make sure that we are where we need to be. We'll see y'all next time. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, click the little bell, be notified as soon as we drop a new video, and we'll see you next time.